Housekeeping. Speaking of housekeeping, one of the things that I hate to do is housekeeping. I cannot stand cleaning. I hate cleaning. Ever since I've been alive, when I was a little kid, I was a ball of energy. I was jumping up and down. I talked faster than I do now. I was just a ball of excitement. As soon as my parents said, do dishes, clean your room, make your bed, it's just like kryptonite. My life was sucked out of me, and I lost a reason for being and a reason for life, and I would just cry and complain and whine. Why do I have to clean? It makes no sense. 30 years later, when Elise tells me the same thing, go clean it, you have to do this, it's the same thing. My life is sucked out of me. I feel like I have a purpose to be doing things that are important, and really cleaning, it doesn't matter. When you think about life, when you think about eternity, when you think about what God is doing around the world, cleaning doesn't matter. So when she tells me to clean, I cry and I whine and I pull out verses from the Bible. I use the Declaration of Independence. I use the Geneva Convention and talk about cruel and unusual torture, punishment, and it's devastating to me to have to clean. I feel like it just sucks the meaning of my life away. And I do it because I have to, but I'll be whining and in bad attitude the whole time I do it. Because there's something weird about me, and I think it's weird about you too. We want to matter. And I feel like in hell, that's what you're going to be doing, cleaning and over, and it's going to get dirty, and that's what you're going to have to do. And in light of everything in the world, cleaning really doesn't matter. And I want to matter. In fact, I want to do things that matter. So I feel that, wow, I'm putting water in my hand and cleaning these dishes. I feel like I could be doing so many more important things. I could be writing. I could be reading. I could be spending time with my family. I could be watching a football game. That's not that important, but I could be doing so many other. I think I'm going to switch microphones. Something's happening with this one here. I'm just going to pop this. All right, cool. You got it? Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Sorry for all the technical stuff today. We'll get it fixed for next week. But back to mattering. Cleaning doesn't. I feel like I do. And I feel like all of us want to matter. We want to be important. We want to know that the world is different because I lived. You want to know that the world is different because you're alive. And dishes come and go, but relationships. Okay, I'm going to stop that about cleaning. I hope my wife got the hint. I'm just kidding. I'm being a little bit facetious. Man, what's wrong with me? Yes, I'm being sarcastic there. and I'm being sarcastic, but not by a lot. I really feel that way, some of it. And I'm telling you that because I think, here's what I think, and this is what I believe, we'll see this in a second. I feel like you and we were created in the image of God. Like you have God's fingerprints all over your life. And because you were made in the image of God, there is something inside of you. There's this longing, a yearning, a desire to matter, to have significance, to have purpose, to make a difference. The word that I'm going to use this morning is greatness. Greatness. You, me, we were made to be great. God made you for greatness. He didn't make you to be ordinary. He didn't make you to be mediocre. God created every single one of us for greatness. And there's something in us, there's this longing that we want to matter. We want to do things that matter. We want to know that my family, the people around me, my friends, my community, this area, it's different because we're here. And as a church, we feel the same way. Our church was meant for greatness. We want to know that this community is different because Washington Cathedral is here. We believe we were made for greatness. So as we grow up through your life experience, when you live your life, you start figuring out, okay, there's this desire in me to be great. How do I do that? What does that mean? And we start picking up and learning what it means to be great. And the world has its values, and they're teaching their values, and we start adopting some of them, or we hear about them, and we start picking up these guiding principles. And these guiding principles tell us, and they lead us to greatness, we think. So here are some of the values that the world says. The world says this is greatness. Greatness is defined as financial success. That's greatness. So we've heard that. We've had that message taught to us. We've seen that on TV. We've seen that in magazines. Greatness is financial success. If you really want to be great, if you really want to be amazing, what you need to do is you need to achieve financial success. And there's something to that maybe, but we also know that some of the richest people in the world are the saddest people in the world. They're alone. So obviously it can't just be financial success. It has to be something else. Well, maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's fame and popularity. Greatness is defined as fame. All the kids laugh because of Justin Bieber. Fame or popularity, for maybe that's how we become great. We become great if we can elevate ourselves to a place where we are known and we have significance and people follow us and they listen to us and then we get 1 million Facebook friends and 1 million Twitter followers and 1 million LinkedIn linkers, whatever they're called, and that defines if we're great or not. But then we realize some of the people who have the biggest followers are just plain dumb. Justin Bieber, I don't think he has a functioning brain. And I mean that nicely, as nice as ways can put it. But what I mean is, really, that's greatness? He's talented, he can sing, but really, he's not that intelligent. I don't think that's great. We know that just having money, that just being popular doesn't make you great. So maybe it's beauty, maybe it's in your looks, maybe greatness is defined as beauty. But then we know that's not true because beauty fades, the Bible says, and as we get older, our beauty, old people are beautiful, amen, but at the same time, we have to be honest, right? We're not what we used to be. It's fading eventually, and that's what's going to happen. And I'm sorry, I apologize. It's happening to me too. But that's just part of life. It just happens. So maybe it's something else. Maybe greatness is achievements. Maybe it's academic achievements. Maybe it's athletic achievements. Nike, last year during the Olympics, they had this huge campaign that was called Find Your Greatness. And they would point to some of these Olympians, these world-class athletes, and say, look what they done. They are great. And it's true, they are great. But are they the only ones that are great? Are just Olympians great? What about the rest of us? There has to be more than that. And really, there are so many principles, guiding principles that tell us how to be great. And it's confusing. Is it all of them? Do we have to have all of them to be great? Do we have to have some of them? Is it a mix? Is it mutually exclusive? Because on one hand, we have this desire I think that was put there by God to be great. And then we have all these competing and weird ideas, definitions of greatness. So what is it? Is it education? Is it fame? Is it money? Is it achievement? Is it achievement in your business, in your family? What is it? What is greatness and how are we going to achieve it? And this is why, reasons like this is exactly why I love the Bible. Because it's so relevant. It speaks to you and to me today. So go home and read your Bible. You're not going to get anything better out of the day than reading the Bible. And in the Bible, here's what we're going to see. That God has his own definition of greatness. And his definition, it's not mysterious. It's not murky. There's nothing ambiguous about it. It is clear. It is crystal clear what God defines as greatness. And what God is going to be doing is that he shared that message with his disciples. And then these guys took that message and they wrote about it in their letters that end up in the Bible. So throughout the whole New Testament, this principle, this idea, what greatness is throughout the New Testament. You're going to find it in the writings of Peter, the writings of Paul, the writings of John. Even James writes about it. But it all started when Jesus himself told his disciples what it means to be great. He heard them arguing about greatness and he says, you know what? You're following the wrong goals. It's not fame. It's not money. It's not prestige. Greatness is something else entirely. And Jesus gave us the foundations of what we call the greatness principle. And this is the greatness principle. It's as simple as this. When you bless others, when you serve others, when you pour yourself out for others, God blesses you. God serves you. God values you. Because we believe, the greatness principle says, greatness is found in serving, in service. And here's what I know, that God, your heavenly Father, is so in love with you, and he wants to bless you. He wants you to live an abundant life. In fact, he died on the cross so you can have access to have access to God and be in relationship with him so that you can live this life. And if you're going to experience this life, it's only going to happen when you embrace this greatness principle, when you see greatness the way God sees greatness. And if we miss out on that principle, we're going to miss out on everything that God has in store for us. So this idea of greatness, it's been around forever. Plato has his definition. Aristotle has a definition. And then Jesus comes along and tells his disciples his definition. So they're walking, and they've spent years with Jesus now. It's been probably, he's walking, we're not exactly sure how many years, but it's either 2 or 3. And he's walking towards the end of his life. And the disciples are having a conversation behind. We're not sure if Jesus is walking ahead of them, but eventually they get to where they're going, and that's where we'll pick up the story. It's Mark chapter 9, verse 33. Here's what it says. After they arrived at Capernaum and settled in a house, Jesus asked his disciples, "What were you discussing out on the road?" And the disciples put on a guilty look on their face. They're like, "Oh." You know that look that your children have when you walk in on them and they're doing something like they should be sleeping, but they're playing with their toys. My son has that look constantly. And it's like the guilty look, and he has it. He's been caught, and the disciples have been caught. Because when they were walking, they were talking about something they shouldn't have been talking about. Because Jesus had told them, I'm going to die, guys. This is it for me. I'm going to die. And they didn't believe him. And instead of helping him, encouraging him, they're talking about who's going to be greater. Who is going to be the greatest? Is it going to be Peter? Peter says, yes, it's going to be me. Jesus said, I'm the rock. It's going to be me. And John's like, no, it's not going to be you. You're crazy. I'm the beloved disciple. I'm his favorite. I'm going to be the greatest. And then Andrew comes on. It's me. I'm the one who brought you, Peter. I'm going to be the greatest. And while this is happening, Judas is stealing all their money, and they're ignoring him. And all the while, they're arguing who's going to be the greatest. And then Jesus walks in. You know, when your boss walks in or your family member walks in and you've been talking about them and they have that look on their face. And here's what they say, verse 34. Jesus asked them, what were you discussing on the road? But they didn't answer because they had been arguing about which of them was greatest. And Jesus sat down. He called the 12 disciples over to him and he said, whoever wants to be first must take last place and be the servant of everyone else. Whoever wants to be first, whoever wants to be great, whoever wants to find significance, they must be last. And you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. What is Jesus talking about? When has last place been first place? In what arena of life does that happen? It doesn't happen, right? The first place person, they're first place. The person who comes in last, they're last place. Why would Jesus flip that around? And then he says, and then whoever wants to be great must be the servant of everyone else. The servant? Really? Because the way I think about it, the one being served, they're probably the greater one. They're probably the one who made it. You would rather be the one being served than the one serving. So why is the great one the servant? It doesn't make any sense. If it was like, you raise your hand and Jesus were asking us, okay, who wants to be a servant? Raise your hand. Who wants to be served? Obviously, I want to be served. If it's the difference between making breakfast and serving it versus someone making me breakfast and bringing it, I'm going to take the one who's being served. That's obvious. It makes no sense. What is Jesus talking about? Because serving is hard. Serving is difficult. Serving is inconvenient. Serving is humbling. Serving is just, the last thing, I don't even like that word servant. It's too close to slave. I just don't like those words. I'd rather be the other guy. But Jesus says clearly, whoever wants to be great, whoever wants to be first, must take last place and be the servant of everyone else. And in Matthew 23:11, here's how he says it, in case you missed it. The greatest among you must be a servant. A servant?
Really? That's what the greatest is going to be? That's your greatness, is serving people? That's the greatness principle? And even though it doesn't make sense, like logically, it doesn't make sense. If you've served, I'm sure you have, when you did it, didn't you feel like you might have been complaining when you did it, but afterwards when you saw the impact, when you saw the results, when you saw the gratitude, when you saw the person whose life was different, I mean, didn't that feel awesome? Like, didn't it feel great? And that's what Jesus is pointing to. He's pointing to a fact that when you serve, when you pour yourself out for others, when you put their needs first, you experience something that becomes addicting. You experience something that you cannot get enough of. You experience something that's great. That's greatness when you serve others. And that's what Jesus is talking about. You've experienced that. I've experienced that. Just this last week, my wife was sick. She had a little cold, allegedly. And when she was sick, she had, it's hard on us. Our family just falls apart. And I was working during the day, and she asked me to go get groceries. So I said, okay, I'll go. And I had to take the kids because she's sick, and I have to take care of the kids. So I worked all throughout the day, long day, come home, and then I have to go and get groceries. And she gives me a list, and I have both kids with me. I have Isabella, and I have Elijah. And her list, it's not simple like bread, milk, and butter. It's like French, Italian, bread, subsidized. I don't even know I don't even understand it still. It's just like this weird product that's in this one aisle. You have to look through a store. It looks like a maze. And I can't find any of the stuff she's sending me. And I'm getting frustrated because Elijah's just talking and talking and talking. I'm ignoring him, and Isabella's crying, and it's just hard. And I'm getting frustrated because I can't find anything on this list. And I'm holding Isabella with my left arm. It's my weak arm. And what you have to understand is that she's a tiny baby, but she has like the density of like a bowling ball because she's so heavy, and my arm is like feeling pain and going numb, and my arm is sending signals to my brain, just drop her, you don't love her, just drop her. So I'm trying to ignore those signals, and at the same time, I'm dragging. I hope it's Elijah. I haven't looked back there in a while. It's just some random kid I'm dragging. He's yapping and yelling, and I don't know what he's doing. And I'm mad. I'm frustrated. I can't find anything. And then my phone is ringing, and I know it's her. And Elijah's like, get the phone. I'm like, I can't get the phone. I got 2 kids on my hands, and I'm just yelling at the phone. I'm coming. And I know it's her telling me to hurry up. And the entire time, I was just so frustrated. I ended up coming home, and I messed up half the list she gave me, and I was not in a good attitude and having a good attitude. I had a bad attitude about it, and that's serving for you, right? Nothing glorious, nothing great about that. I did not experience greatness at all. And plus, I had a bad attitude. 2 days later, my wife comes by my office, and she dropped off a note that I'm going to read here. And I text her for permission. She never got back to me, so I take that as a yes. And no, I'm just kidding. She gave me permission. And here's what it says. I'm not going to read all of it. It's really long, and I don't understand her handwriting. It says, thank you for everything you do for us, whether it's helping with the baby or Elijah in the midst of a very demanding job, putting up with our own, I don't even know what that word says, remaining steadfast and having character. Thank you for all that. You bring laughter into our life. I just wanted to let you know I see what you do, some of it at least, and I appreciate you more than words can express. We love you, and we're always praying for you. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that nice? Wouldn't that make your day? It made my day. And here's what happened. When I read that note, I had 2 emotions. First off, I felt so guilty for having such a bad attitude the entire time and cursing her in my head while I was doing this list, right? So I repented of that. But the second thing I experienced is what Jesus is talking about here. And for that little window, I experienced greatness. I experienced being a part of something that matters. I realized that I poured myself out for my family. I served them, and it was frustrating and it was annoying, but it did matter. It wasn't just meant for nothing. It wasn't useless. It wasn't moot. It was something that mattered because I was leaving for them a legacy. I was showing them how much they matter to me, how valuable they are to me, how much I love them and value them. And throughout it all, I just felt great. I knew my Heavenly Father was proud of me. I know He was saying, this is what serving is like, and you can experience this more, Ray, if you will serve. For that window, it didn't matter how much money I had. It didn't matter if I was popular. It didn't matter that no one commented on my little funny post on Facebook. None of that mattered. You know what mattered? That my family thought I was great. That my Heavenly Father allowed me to experience greatness. I think that's what Jesus is talking about. That when we go and bless others and serve others and give ourselves for others, you're going to experience greatness. That's the greatness principle. That's what God has in store for us, the greatness principle. So Jesus taught that. His disciples, his followers latched onto it. They loved it. They embraced that thought. And they became people who would follow this principle. They defined greatness by serving others. So all of his disciples, they went off and they served. And they served. The early church is known for being the church that would serve. Who are the people in our community who have needs? It's widows. It's orphans. Then that's what we're going to take care of. James would say that's true religion. Taking care of widows, taking care of orphans. Who else is in need? It's the Gentiles. Then we're going to serve them. And they became a serving church. And that's why we at Washington Cathedral are a serving church. What's ironic about this, what's incredible about this whole little story of Jesus telling his disciples serving, is that Jesus was in the middle of serving us because he was walking towards his death because he wanted to serve us. And here's how he put it. On Matthew 20:28, he said this, "For even the Son of Man," Jesus, "came not to be served, but to serve others." Jesus himself, who had every right to demand service, who could have asked and people would have served him, he said, "No, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve." So God himself humbled himself. He took the nature of a servant and he served us. He served his disciples. He served his community. He got on his knees and washed their feet as a model and an example for us. And then he says, not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. You see, Jesus blessed us. He served us. He saw us. He saw our needs and our priorities and our issues. And he says, I'm going to make them my needs and my priorities and my issues. And I'm going to serve them with the ultimate act of service by dying on the cross for us. See, Jesus is a servant king. He not only taught this, he lived this out. He served us. And that's the power of the greatness principle. We follow Jesus. So as a church at Washington Cathedral, we embrace this. We don't think there's anything greater than service. Greatness is found in serving. So what do we do as a church? We serve. We look around at the needs of our community. We look around at the needs of our people and we ask, how can we serve? We're going to serve. We're committed to service. And right now, you're sitting next to greatness. You're sitting next to people who are great. You're sitting next to people who serve, who are committed to serving, who find ways to serve. You're sitting next to people who serve people who don't have a place to live in. They've invited them into their home to give them a place. You're sitting next to people who they found people who don't have food and they've invited them to eat. You're sitting next to people who have served people who have addictions and hang-ups and they said, we're going to serve you until you get set free. You're sitting next to people who serve in all sorts of capacities. Your children, they're being served right now by people who love them in the Sunday school classes. Your teenagers, they're being served by people who love them and care for them. The bulletins you're holding in your hands, the PowerPoints up there, the musicians, all of that, it doesn't happen by magic. It happens because people say, I want to be great. I'm going to serve. I'm going to put together this bulletin. I'm going to run the soundboard. Chris is our guy doing that. Raymond's doing our video PowerPoint. They're great because they serve. You're sitting in chairs and they didn't come here magically. They came here because people decided, I'm going to serve. You drank coffee this morning. You had snacks. You had people who shook your hands and welcomed you. They're all great. Because they're serving. And that's what we believe in our church. We go out of our way to serve. And we're not going to apologize about that. It's inconvenient. It's difficult. It's hard. Sometimes but we're going to do it because our master did it for us. He served us, so we're going to serve them. That's what we do. So what I'm calling us to do, to continue being this great Canyon Network, is to be great, to find your greatness, to be great. And the first step to being great is to be aware that when you leave today, when you go to your work this next week, you're going to be surrounded by opportunities, by needs, by places where you can serve. And that's the first step, is becoming aware of that. And then after you become aware, make a decision. How are you going to be great? How will you serve? How will you bless others so you can experience God's blessing, so you can experience greatness? And I made a list in your handout of 5 simple ways you can do. 5 simple ways you can be great. How you can bless other people. Number 1, you can give of your time. What if you just say, I'm going to give 30 minutes of every day to serve somewhere. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know who. I'm just going to look for opportunities. I'm going to create that margin in my schedule, and I'm going to give my time. Or maybe you share your talents. Maybe you love being with kids. Serve in our kids program. Maybe you love singing. We need singers. We have great singers, but I'm not saying what I'm saying. We have great singers. We need more singers. You like to set up, you like to be in the background, then we have, find a place where you can share your talents. Maybe you can invest your treasure, knowing that when you give, you're giving for something that is, matters in light of eternity. Maybe you can encourage with your talk. You make a decision. This week, I'm going to pick a day, and that day, I'm not going to say anything that's not encouraging. Every word that comes out of my mouth, I'm just going to encourage. I'm going to encourage my coworkers. I'm going to encourage my boss. I'm going to encourage my family. And I bet you that day you become the most popular person in the office because people love encouragement. And that's a simple way you can serve and bless others. Maybe you share your story. Maybe if God has done something in your life, He's rescued you, He's redeemed you, He's changed you, He's provided for you. Whatever miracle God has done in your life, what if you make a decision, a conscious effort, I'm going to share that story. I'm going to share with other people. Because people can argue with the Bible, they can argue theology, they can argue with this message, but no one's going to argue with your story because it's your story. Maybe that's how you can bless people. So what I'm asking all of us to do, all of our gatherings, all of our churches, is to pick one of these and to make a decision. This week, I'm going to encourage with my talk. That's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to bless others. That's how I'm going to find my greatness, by blessing people with my talk, by encouraging people with my words. That's what I'm going to do. So which is it going to do for you? How are you going to find your greatness? That's the challenge for you today. That's your action step. Find your greatness. Let me close with this story. It's a story you probably never heard of. When you think about the person that's had the most impact on the economic injustice, on the AIDS pandemic in Africa, when you think about the person who's most helped, reduce the debt and to help in these, this global orphan crisis, you probably think, it probably was Mother Teresa, or maybe it was Bill Gates, or maybe it was Bill Clinton, or George Bush, or Jimmy Carter. You're not sure. Maybe it's one of those, right? That's what we think, that they've had the most impact. But they're wrong. They haven't. The person who's had the most impact on responding to this crisis that's going around the world is a guy named Stephen Reynolds. None of you guys have ever heard of Stephen Reynolds. And I had never heard of him until I ran across this story. Because Stephen Reynolds in 1985 moved down to Ethiopia. And he made a decision that he wanted to be great in Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia was experiencing the greatest famine of its generation during that time. So he went down there to serve on the front lines and to pass out food and to organize the Red Cross and do whatever he could to help these people who are suffering and dying, children. And when he got down there, he couldn't do much because he couldn't speak the language. He didn't have that many giftings. He didn't have that many talents. So the organization he went with asked him, hey, would you just host people who come down? And he was so frustrated that this is what he had to do. Basically, he had to be a servant. And they asked him, we're sending you down a European couple, and they're going to come down and they want to spend time with you. Would you host them? And if you've ever had to do that, it is the worst. It is the worst when you have to do that because these people are asking you a million questions. They think you're an expert on the country. You just make up stuff. It's just like the worst situation to have to host these uppity, people from Europe who speak with a funny accent. Just kidding. He has to take care of these people. And he's like, oh man, I don't want to do that. And they said, that's what we want you to do. So he said, fine, I will serve them. And he served them. For 2 long weeks, he drove them around everywhere. For 2 long weeks, he made their breakfast, their lunch, and their dinner. For 2 long weeks, he answered every question they asked. For 2 long weeks, he had to make sure they had all their needs kept for. He just served and served and served. And at the end of the week, Paul and Allie, who were the two who had come down, said, Steve, thank you so much for giving us your time and showing us around. We can't do much now, but we're going to do something. I don't know what we can do, but we're going to do something. And Paul and Allie left. And Paul has become a spokesman, the spokesman of our generation for this cause. And he has spoken to kings and queens. He's spoken to presidents and members of parliament and members of Congress. And he's spoken to prime ministers. He's spoken before the United Nations. He has spoken to all these groups, to every nonprofit, anyone you can imagine. He has won awards. He led a movement called the Debt Relief Program of 2000, the Jubilee Debt Relief Program, that billions of dollars of debt in these poor countries were eliminated, and that money was used for schools, for clinics, for churches, for children, and areas around the world that's suffering great injustice. He has done so much. He even met with the Pope himself to move the whole church to respond. He's met with Christian leaders, with Billy Graham, with Bill Hybels, you name it. He has met with all of these people to move people to respond. You know Paul, but you don't know him by that name. You know him by his other name, his nickname. His name is Bono of the U2 group. And Bono has become a force of nature fighting for these children at risk. And I tell you that story because of this. Steve Reynolds had a bad attitude, just like I did, about serving. And Steve had no idea what his service would cause. And his little acts of service, in response to that, look what God was able to do. Use a guy like Bono. You have no idea your capacity for greatness, what your acts of service can do. So that's why we're going to embrace this call to be great, knowing that even the littlest things, the littlest acts of service have the greatest potential for greatness. And that's what our church is calling us to do, to be great. Would you stand with me? I'm close in a word of prayer. Father, thank you so much for serving us, so that when you saw us, you rescued us, you served us, you put our needs before your needs. And in response to that, to reciprocate, we want to serve. We want to be servants. We want to tap into our greatness. We want to look around and become aware of the needs around us. We want to become aware and start serving. We want to embrace this principle that greatness is found in serving. So as we go this week, help us be great. Show us how we can be great. We're not going to accept the other models for greatness. We're going to accept your model for greatness. And we're going to look for ways to serve. As individuals, as a community, as this church, we're going to continue to build this great caring network by